Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CLIU's Make May Memorable series that our professional learning team has been launching throughout the month of May. My name is Deanne Oley, and I am so happy to be here to share with you the last session in this series, which also happens to be the last session of this kind for the current school year. Today, I will be sharing resources and examples to help engage your students in inquiry-based learning. Teachers of all grade levels are welcome. As the experts of your particular grade level, I invite you to think about how inquiry learning might work in your own classroom. This slide deck is available to you on the YouTube page, so all of the examples and resource links referenced in this session will be available for you to use at any time. Now let's get started and dive a bit into inquiry learning. On the screen, you will see the URL to access this slide deck if you would like to do so while you are watching this video. So what is inquiry-based learning? I'm going to show you a very brief video that will explain what inquiry-based learning is. So let's watch this.
What is inquiry-based learning? There's lots of talk about inquiry-based learning and lots of overcomplicated definitions. But as Einstein said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. So let's make it simple in 60 seconds or less, starting now. Inquiry is when you, the student, ask a big question about something that really interests you. You are the driver on this journey towards your own answer. You create a plan to start, but the adventure is open-ended, so you don't know exactly where it will lead. You try different paths, you play, and it's research, because you think, imagine, and create in an ongoing process. You organize your ideas and reflect each step of the way, and soon you reach clarity and create something new to share with others. It feels like climbing this big mountain, and when you get to the top, you feel proud and see farther than you've ever seen before. It helps to have a facilitator or coach who's caring and wise to guide you with the right questions so you can discover your own inner inquiry ninja as you develop skills, build confidence, enrich learning, create meaning, and contribute to the world. Come check it out at inquiryninja.com.
So that's just a very little quick overview of inquiry-based learning. When we look at what the benefits of inquiry-based learning are for students, there are so many, and this is just a small sampling of what inquiry-based learning does to help students grow. Preps the brain for learning, cultivating skills for all different areas of learning and content, deepens understanding, creates ownership for students, and we know how important that is in the classroom, as well as out in the real world. Students are taking an active role in their learning. That teacher is becoming the facilitator, and the students are really just becoming much more active, which in turn engages them more. When students are more engaged and they are more active, this also helps to empower voice and choice for the student. It helps to foster a curiosity and a love of learning. And that's what we are trying to do, is we are trying to have our students embrace learning and make it important to them. It teaches perseverance, growth mindset, and self-regulation so that our students have that grit and resiliency because they are continually questioning and diving deeper into what they're learning. And it does certainly work across all classroom settings. So when we talk about inquiry-based learning, we are really looking at multiple different ways to get to true independent inquiry-based learning. So we are going to look at a few of those ways and how we are going to scaffold our students up to true independent inquiry. But before we do that, let's take a look at the role of the teacher in inquiry-based learning. We're so used to being the person up front, giving our students information, passing on the content and the meaning and the why, all of that. We have to shift our role a little bit, and we have to learn to become that sage on, we don't want to be that sage on the stage. We want to be that guide on the side. We've heard that numerous times, that language. We are really working towards being the facilitator in this type of classroom. So we're going to take a few moments here and look at this video that will hopefully help explain the role of you as the teacher in an inquiry-based classroom. And remember, this is not something that has to be done all day, every day, in every subject. There are certainly many, many times that direct instruction is so very important. But this is also something that is extremely important as we grow our students into being independent thinkers.
Teachers are often positive about the value of using inquiry-based learning, but many find it difficult to overcome the barriers for adopting this approach in their classrooms. One of the main barriers for adopting RBL is that teachers are not quite sure how to incorporate it in their classroom practice. Many teachers also feel under pressure to fulfill the curriculum requirements, and they often assume that RBL will take too long. Although it is true that initially RBL can be time-consuming, once the teacher becomes more experienced, their planning becomes more efficient, and they are able to build a library of resources. Teachers are also unsure how to assess students in an RBL classroom, and they have concerns that this teaching methodology doesn't suit educational systems where the assessment focuses on content in the form of final exams. To help teachers overcome these constraints, the ISE have developed an inquiry model incorporating 5 learning activities. Scaffolding plays an important role in this model, especially where teachers and students are new to inquiry. Most teachers and students are used to traditional methods of learning, so starting out with RBL is a different experience. Some teachers resist handing over control, while some students resist accepting it. Ideally, teachers should gradually apply inquiry into their classroom to suit the needs and level of their students, and scaffolding allows teachers to adjust accordingly. This means that teachers provide more support and guidance when developing inquiry skills, and gradually taper off support until students can do it themselves. Understanding the teacher's role in RBL will help with scaffolding. It can be difficult for teachers starting out with RBL to know what their role is, and also to know how to work that role in the most effective way to ensure that students experience true inquiry. It's important that the teacher has a deeper, integrated understanding of the curriculum content in order to facilitate the students' inquiries. They can then decide on learning activities that are going to engage the students and are designed to be challenging to promote their critical thinking skills. Activities need to revolve around the learners themselves, where the teacher stands on the side and provides guidance and support through open-ended questioning. The teacher can stand back and give the students the latitude to explore through the activities so that they can arrive at the learning objectives on their own, in their own way, and not just in the way that a teacher thinks is the best way for them to get there. The teacher guides the direction of the activity by posing questions. These are open-ended questions that stimulate more thinking and encourage students to take a more considered approach. It's very important to have questions lined up for various scenarios so that you are able to lead the students towards the learning goals while still offering flexibility in the direction. Teachers have a tendency to jump in too quickly with the answer if there is a slow response to questions. Give the students time to think about their answers and perhaps rephrase questions. Also, try and avoid jumping in and fixing the areas where students have gone wrong in their activities. It's better to use questions to help them to find the solutions themselves.
So one of the best quotes, so to speak, I think in that video was the very last thing that was stated. Don't be afraid to let your students have fun while exploring and learning. Because when, of course, they are having fun learning, it doesn't feel to them like they're learning, but they tend to excel and be more engaged, as we know. So there's a few types of inquiry-based learning, that scaffolded approach, as was mentioned in this brief video. So the types of inquiry-based learning, typically there's 4 of them. You'll see is you move through some of this work if you engage in becoming a more inquiry-based classroom. There are some other words that are used to describe the types of inquiry. Typically, we have confirmation inquiry, which means that students are provided with the question and the procedure by the teacher. So basically, you're giving them everything, and the results are known in advance. Structured inquiry, as we move up this scale, is where the students are unpacking resources that are predetermined by the teacher to provide context relative to the topic or questions. So, the students are given something and they're unpacking it on their own, but they're still provided all that context around it. As you see, when we move to guided inquiry, students are maybe in groups and they're designing their own investigation methods, and they reinforce problem solving skills, and they come up with a conclusion to an open question. So you may be providing them with an open-ended question, and they have to dig in and investigate and figure it all out. They've got to use their critical thinking skills. They need to collaborate together as a group. They need to dig and investigate to come up with the conclusions to these questions. And then independent inquiry, sometimes you'll see this listed as free inquiry or open inquiry. Students are the ones that are coming up with the questions as they investigate, utilizing their own different methods. They present their results, and this is helping expand their knowledge base through that discussion that they're having, not only with the group of students they're working with, but with the other students in the classroom, as well as you, the teacher. So this is where you are probing them with more questions. Once they are presenting their results, you're asking some of those other questions, the whys, the hows, those kinds of things. So we are going to look at a few very brief examples of these different types of inquiry. Now, just so you know, confirmation inquiry is really very much like direct instruction. and it kind of parallels direct instruction. So that's something that we're not going to see too many examples of in this particular presentation. We're going to look a little more at some of the other types of inquiry, so you can see some of these examples that are showing you what they look like in that classroom setting. So structured inquiry, this is a very brief, I think it's a 1.5-minute video. And the question in this is, how would you build the best high profit hotel? Now, one of the things about inquiry is not only is it asking all of these different types of questions that students need to investigate, there's also typically very hands-on engagement, whether it be with manipulatives out in the environment. You'll see this, you'll see that your thinking, it lends itself to science, but there's inquiry that can be done in all of our subject areas. So this is, how would you build the best high profit hotel? And this is an example of structured inquiry.
Hotel math. I remember popping into this grade 6-7 math enrichment program, and I saw the teacher leading students through a really neat inquiry project. The students were divided into company teams and asked, how would you build the best, most high profit hotel? They were given 50 snap cubes, which would each represent individual hotel rooms, and this list of rules and guidelines, like all 50 cubes must be used, all rooms must have at least one window, the hotel must be all in one piece. And then the students worked together in their teams to hypothesize and discuss and experiment and test their theory about what would be the most profitable hotel design. And this was a structured inquiry because the teacher established the driving question, and there was a way to calculate and determine which hotel design would be the most profitable, but there were many creative ways for the students to get to that result. And there was also a lot of rich, open-ended discussion around, well, what constitutes the best and how can we make our hotel even more profitable beyond these rules and guidelines? And so this activity scaffolded a lot of learning and ideas and lots of deep thinking around mathematical concepts, and also led the way to more creative, independent architecture and engineering projects to come. And I could tell the kids had a lot of fun with it.
So moving on, we are going to look at, again, a very brief example of guided inquiry. Before we do that, here are a few examples. Structured inquiry. These will go ahead out to specific examples of structured inquiry. And you're going to see some lessons and some videos and some other things here for you. So moving on to guided inquiry. This one, the question that is asked is, what kind of magical coat would a time traveler wear? So let's take a look at this example of guided inquiry.
The time traveler's coat. One time I had some grade 6-7 students in an enrichment program, which was called Time Travelers. And I asked the students, what kind of a magical coat do you think a time traveler would wear? And the idea was just for them to draw out their designs and to have rich discussion. But in the end, they wanted to make this coat. So they did some research, we had conversations, and they worked together to upcycle an old lab coat by dyeing it, drawing on it, gluing things to it. They drew this wormhole with tips for the time traveler on how to avoid being spaghettified by the strong gravitational field. They painted on it a clock and control panel for the time traveler to set in order to initiate the travel. They glued on little puzzle pieces representing a button, which were each a different slice of time. They wrote famous quotes about time travel and included their own questions and ideas and notes. And they had a lot of fun taking turns trying on this coat. It was a really kooky, unusual project and definitely open-ended, and it was a lot of fun.
So you can see we can do this type of guided inquiry. In this case, students really just kind of took it to the next level. They wanted to explore more, and they did. And it caused the classroom to have more collaboration and more conversation, discussion, helping each other, building, creating this coat for this time traveler. So you can see that inquiry can be a lot of fun in the classroom while students are learning. So here's some examples that are going to take you to some lessons for guided inquiry. And again, you're going to be able to access those from this link. Independent, or sometimes you'll hear again, open inquiry or free inquiry. This example is, the question is, how would I make an earthquake themed game that we could play in physical education class? So another thing you're seeing here is it's not just about science. Again, many people think that inquiry really just happens in science classroom. We saw math, this was the last experiment, or the last example, I'm sorry, was in English and, reading a story. And now we're looking at something that can happen in PE class. So let's take a look at this example of independent inquiry.
The earthquake game. I remember last year at our elementary school, our school participated in the Great BC Shakeout Drill, which is where we led students through an emergency protocol with these different stations and doing search and rescue scenarios just to make sure we were prepared for an earthquake. And one grade 4 student who was in my class, we'll call Bella, was really fascinated and alert during this process. And I found out later that during recess, after this whole thing, she had snuck back into the class when no one was there, and she drew this elaborate plan on the whiteboard for her own game. She asked herself, how could I make an earthquake game that we could play in PE class? And she conceived it with how we would use walkie-talkies to communicate and hide behind big blue mats to represent these emergency shelters. And students would wear reflective vests and act as rescuers and drag people to safety. And it was a wonderfully conceived game. And it was incredibly heartwarming to see, because Bella is a student who has an IEP. She has one-on-one EA support. She has a number of developmental and learning challenges. But here's a student who was passionate about her idea. She had seen her other classmates planning and organizing their own inquiry projects, and now she was ready and wanting to get involved. And she stepped out as a creative leader in our class, and she led this game in PE. And it was a wonderful, wonderful example of great learning and passion and inquiry.
This is a really great example of how students can flourish when they get to that point of independent inquiry. They're curious little people no matter what. And that's across all grade levels and all content areas. We want to support that curiosity. We want to be able to help them grow. And this type of learning is really key in doing that for our students. So again, think not just in the science classroom, think about how this can happen across what we do in our schools, in no matter what the content area. And here is a link to some lessons on independent inquiry. Now you're going to see when you link to these lessons, right here, you can see they're from Just Science Now and the Beacon Lesson Library. But just know that because it's coming from a source that is generally for science, these particular lessons that I've shared here in this resource area for you, you're going to be able to adapt them to different content areas. So just keep that in mind when you're exploring these links in this slide deck when you get that after you've watched this presentation. One of the things that I really want to bring up about inquiry is something called Start Soul. And this is really going to help you as a teacher get to that point of an inquiry classroom. Now, SOLs, self-organized learning environments, are really meant to be done in one classroom. So when we look at things like project-based learning, we get overwhelmed because it takes so much time and so many resources to make that happen. You know, sometimes a project-based learning takes weeks. We don't have that kind of time. We have so many other constraints around us. So a Start Soul is really meant to happen in one single classroom, whether your class is 40 minutes or your class is a block in a secondary setting. So it's a self-organized learning environment. And this graphic here will link to the Start Soul website for you to create yourself an account if you'd like. And it's really about questioning, investigating, and reviewing. So there is a database of well over 18,000 essential questions for you as the teacher. And then students are investigating. They're working in small groups and they each have a role getting to that, to answer that essential question, that big question. And then they present their findings, so to speak, to the rest of the groups. So it's really a process, and it's something that I think if you get yourself started on, you're going to see how easy inquiry is in your classroom. And I, again, have all of these linked at the end of this so that you have a list of resources. But let me show you what a SOL is. This here is going to show you how, and I won't play that one, but right here, this is Intro to SOL. So I want to show you this brief video on what a SOL looks like.
What is the future of learning, and how have we come to where we are today? If you look at present-day schooling, it's quite easy to trace its origins. It was the byproduct of one of the largest and last empires on this planet. Go back 300 years and try to imagine a planet without computers, without telephones, without the internet. It's the start of the Industrial Revolution, and we needed lots and lots of identical people. They needed to know three things: how to read, write, and do arithmetic. The machines used to produce these people was our present-day schools. It was a machine engineered by the Victorians that was so robust, it still runs today. Only it's producing identical people for a system that no longer exists. The empire has long since disappeared. But how about the education system it left behind? It's the system still used by today's children. Children who are absorbed with their mobile phones, but who are reluctantly going to school and picking up their books. Now that we are seconds away from a Google search, what role does remembering actually play? Could it be that we are heading towards a future where remembering stuff is obsolete? Some might think this is terrible. Or is it? Before the internet, there was great value put in knowing and remembering. Yet, this is actually the lowest level of learning. As Benjamin Bloom so eloquently framed it, remembering stuff falls at the bottom of the learning list. Today, it is more critical to know how to find answers than it is to remember them. So, what does this all mean? It means we are free to focus our educational process on high-order skills, such as evaluation and creation. It means we can take time that was once allotted for memorization and translate it into potential that has, till now, gone untapped. Few debate this point, yet today's education is often challenged to evolve and adapt. It goes against the fundamentals of the Victorian system. we are now learning the value of educational systems that self-organize. Instead of teaching, we have learned that in allowing the educational process to self-organize, learning emerges. This process is called SOUL, which stands for Self-Organized Learning Environment. SOUL is not about teaching, but rather letting learning happen. In a SOUL, the role of the teacher is to set a process in motion and stand back in awe as learning occurs naturally. And best of all, it's easy to do. The outcome is children have developed acute critical thinking skills, problem-solving capabilities, and the ability to communicate, all critical to success in school and in the world they're going to face afterwards. SOUL does not require an overhaul of our current school structure. It is applicable to any educational environment where there is a group of learners, access to the internet, and caring facilitators. To learn how to create your own SOUL, watch the SOUL How-To video and let learning happen.
So I think if you take the time to investigate Start SOUL, that you'll really enjoy the process and see how easy it is. And again, here is a SOUL How-To video, and in the essence of time, I'm not going to show you that, but it is here for your viewing at a later date. So SOUL will ask you to create an account, which is great because you'll be able to save them. You'll be able to look at all the essential questions. You'll be able to create your own. There's so much in there. So again, keep that in mind as you begin inquiry in your classroom. This is a really great way to get started, and you can make this something that you use once a week, once every couple of weeks, to really get your students to the point where they are very comfortable with inquiry in their learning. And you're going to see them grow, and the growth will be exponential over time. So this is just a graphic that I thought was really interesting to kind of help wrap some of this up. You know, we are talking inquiry here, and this is with technology, but you can see over here, you can remove the with technology. It's not absolutely necessary. And again, this is my suggestion. But we have teacher communicating, delivering, receiving. So that's really that original area we talked about, that confirmation inquiry, that direct instruction. And we're moving kind of up this pyramid, and we really want to get to this area, right? We want to get to that student-centered engagement in real world. Here, students are producing, they're leading. And that's really what all of this is about, is inquiry-based learning is really about students solving authentic problems, them generating their own interest and working together and collaborating, all of the critical thinking, you know, that we talk about in learning that our students need to enter the real world today. So something, just a visual here that I think kind of helps you see where our students need to be. We're all used to that learning pyramid, and it was just mentioned in the SOUL video. This kind of just puts a little bit of a different spin on it. And this was a great graphic that Trevor McKenzie, if you're not familiar with him, or Sylvia Duckworth, you'll see both of their Twitter handles up here. They're really well known in the education world, somebody you might want to follow on Twitter, but they put together this graphic of 10 reasons to use inquiry-based learning. And they're all the things that we've been talking about, and they're all the things that we know as educators are really good practice. So, you know, dabble, start trying to introduce some inquiry into your classroom. And I think that you'll see how excited your students get. They may resist at first, You may resist at first. It's kind of a struggle in the beginning to let go, but I think that in the end, you'll really see the benefits and how much more enriched your classroom becomes. Kids are interested. Our kids love to learn, they really do. And when they are involved in their own learning and they're able to kind of decide their own path, they really are interested in what they're doing in the classroom. So this is some resources for you. I have some over here, inquiry in some of the different content areas. Start Soul that we just watched that last video. Start Soul is here. These are some other resources, sharing some examples, sharing some lessons, and some ways to dig into inquiry, whether you're just starting or you are at that point where your students are at independent inquiry or free inquiry. And there's some resources for you here as well. And these, I wanted to provide the references of some of the videos and some of the resources that I used. So we have resources as well as references. Those videos that I showed you, those very brief ones with structured, guided, and independent inquiry, they were from Inquiry Ninja. A lot of really great stuff here. Wasabi Learning. I always want to say Wasabi. That is, there are some really great resources here. And then again, Start Soul. So I hope that with this, you will be able to start to introduce some inquiry into your classroom. It's the end of the school year. We've got a few weeks left. Maybe try a Soul in your classroom and see how it goes, and investigate some of these resources and see what you can do to begin the school year in August or September with some inquiry, and then build it up from there. So as you know, this is the last month for our PD of this nature, and all of the monthly themed sessions can be found on our PD Ready page. Make May Memorable. This is the last one today, 5/20, inquiry based. All of them are available on this CLIU Ready page, and the May exit ticket will be available until June 30th. So I thank you. My contact information is here, my email address, as well as my Twitter handle. I hope that you have a wonderful end to your school year and that you have a relaxing summer. And I also hope that you get some time to dig into inquiry-based learning and see how you can bring your classroom to life. Thank you all.